Yes, we do talk EAGLES Eagles here on Birds 365. That would be Mac and Mac, McMullen and McDonald. And we bring in educated guests. We've done so again today. Les Bowen, longtime Eagle reporter.
Educated.
Now.
That's
I don't know about
impressive,
that.
Les. Impressive. Man of education.
Oh, see, I said it because I compare everyone else to me. So compared to me, yeah, you're damn well educated, Les.
I already said that because
that's what I use as the basis for the introduction. Bowen on the Birds podcast, you should check out weekly for Les's thoughts that he doesn't share here with us. We think he gives us everything he's got when he shows up.
I do,
We'll
it's a different time of the week, though. It's on Fridays, and now this is Tuesday. So, during a game week, things usually change. But the bye week will probably be about the same, I guess.
Understood. I think, speaking of changing, how are the Eagles going to change for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks? We got no idea when Dallas Goedert is going to be back, but we know the Eagles are going to be out with him, without him for a period of time. They did it last year. They survived it last year before Goedert came back. Bigger loss, just as big a loss, maybe slightly lesser a loss. Goedert being gone for a month, what kind of effect is it going to have on the Eagles?
Boy, that's a real good question. In some ways, it is less of a loss because they're just not. It was really weird that play that he got hurt on was one of the few times they've really gotten him out in space and managed a real yards after catch kind of completion to him this year. I've been really disappointed and I know they've done a lot with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and so on, but I've been a little bit disappointed with what they've gotten out of Dallas Goedert in terms of catching the ball. I think they've used him a lot in blocking, and we might see that more profoundly than we see differences in the passing game going forward. It's really hard to say exactly what they're going to do. Somebody has brought up, the Julio Jones factor, that he could certainly run some of the routes that Dallas Goedert runs, big-bodied receiver. That makes a certain amount of sense to me. But Julio Jones isn't going to block, Dallas Goedert blocks in the run game or anything like that, or on the screens. It's a problem for them. I don't know how they feel about Jack Stoll. He's a sort of reliable second fiddle. He's not any kind of star, receiver. He's not going to catch 10 passes for 150 yards some week if they really need to go to him. But he's a competent player. And they have Grant Calcaterra, who missed last week with a concussion and has had a real troubling history of concussions, but is also a guy maybe with some more receiving talent, more upside as a receiver than Stoll. And then they have Albert, the guy whose last name I can't pronounce.
Nobody can. We haven't learned it. I have to learn that because Albert O might be a little bit more relevant now.
Yeah, he might, but I don't, who has seen him lately, So I always get a kick when he's inactive. They have the list of inactives they post in their Eagles, with the background and all this stuff. And everybody's in the same font. And then they get down to Albert.
Yeah, you got to lower that thing.
Yeah. His name is like, it looks like it's all one word.
Yeah. Well, we finally got to see Albert for a few snaps this week because Grant was out, as you mentioned, in the concussion protocol. But anytime you lose a player like Dallas Goedert, you're going to have some issues. You're not going to be able to replace him. But the Eagles went through this last year when he broke the small bone in his shoulder and he missed 5 games, and they persevered. I think they won all 5 of those games, by the way. They won most games.
They had an easier path last year.
It was Jack Stoll for the most part getting the most reps, and obviously the passing part of it isn't going to be as effective, and maybe Julio Jones, as you mentioned, can help in that aspect a little bit more than last year. But it's one of those injuries, and that's why I said, Les, this team, Jody and I were talking about, heading into the bye week, this team's got the inside track. They got the number 1 seed again right now. We know, we've seen it. if it has to go, the road has to go through Lincoln Financial Field, they're in really good shape to get back to the Super Bowl. But injuries are such a big part of this league. We've seen it and again, I'm hurting Jody this morning. We've seen it with Jody's Jets. You see it with other quarterbacks going down.
My eye. All right, fine.
Everything can change on a moment's notice, but this team is better than everybody else right now.
I agree. There's a point to be made about they keep playing these one-score games, which is troubling because teams that win a lot of one-score games, at some point the pendulum kind of tends to swing the other way. But in their case, I don't think it's a matter of them just barely being a little better than a lot of these teams. I think it's the injuries that they've had. They've had way more injuries than last year. Even though they had a Dallas Goedert injury last year, they didn't have a situation like they've had in the defensive backfield last year at all, or the offensive line, really. And Hurts wasn't dealing with an injury at this point in the season quite. He was later, obviously. Yeah. I think they're a really good team, and I think if they could stop doing stupid stuff in the final 3 or 4 minutes of games, I don't think these would be one-score games. There was no excuse for that being a one-score game Sunday. I don't want to get off track here for you guys, but it was 28-17 halfway through the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
All you have to do is put a drive together and kick a field goal, and there's no way the Dallas Cowboys get within any kind of reasonable hailing distance.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up, Les, because I think that's one of the issues with this team right now because of Jalen Hurts' injury, his knee injury, has taken his effectiveness in the run game off the table. That's typically where the Eagles want to be, 28-17, 2-score game, and then they run it out. But they're not effective running the football,
right? Unless
Jalen Hurts is part of that equation, unless he is threatening the defense by pulling the football and taking it himself. DeAndre Swift, Kenny Gainwell, Rashad Penny last week, people finally got to see him for 2 carries. Boston Scott when he's here.
Yeah.
This is not a great group.
I don't know. DeAndre Swift looked like Adrian Peterson earlier in the season. DeAndre Swift is a very good running back. I don't think it's a running back problem. I really don't. I don't think they're opening the holes. We saw DeAndre early in that game Sunday do a Shady McCoy, which is what I refer to as Shady often ran behind really not great offensive lines with the Eagles. And he would just, this was what angered Chip Kelly and got him traded. He would take the ball, look at what was supposed to be there, say, no, that's not there, and just take off and go somewhere else. We saw DeAndre do that early in the Sunday game, and it worked very, very well. They're just not opening the holes. I don't know what that's about. This is supposed to be such a great offensive line. Maybe it's all the changes at right guard week to week. Some guys are a little banged up. Elaine Johnson is banged up, but I know teams are committing a lot of people to the box.
Yeah, well, that I would argue is the difference, Les, because you bring up AP. I got to cover AP. Here's Adrian Peterson. We're run the way he ran against 8-man boxes. The Vikings had Christian Ponder at the time. Nobody was afraid of Christian Ponder. So they loaded that thing up, and he won an MVP award in a passing game. He could run on anybody. I saw him convert 3rd and 10s running the football consistently on that season.
Yeah.
DeAndre Swift had a great game, ironically, against Minnesota.
Yeah.
But that was against 6-man boxes.
Yeah.
When you load up the box, he's not LaShawn McCoy even. He's not that big time back. He's a very talented player. Every once in a while, he's going to get that great athletic play that gets you excited. But without Jalen Hurts, and I think it makes sense from this perspective, Les. The Eagles build the roster the way they build the roster. They value certain positions. They pay certain positions. They don't pay running back. You generally get what you pay for, I think.
Here's my thing about Swift, and I'll let you answer in a second, Les. The Minnesota game is the Minnesota game. John's right. Minnesota said, we dare you to run the football. And the Eagles did, and Swift was really good at it, and the Eagles ran him into the ground. How to get 130 against Tampa the next week?
Right.
They're not we dare you to run it against us. They're a pretty damn good defense against the run. And he went for 8 yards a carry and over 130 total. How'd he do that?
Yeah, I don't debate John's. I mean, he's not Adrian Peterson and he's not Shady McCoy, but he's a good running back. And the money thing is, somebody's going to pay him something this offseason, even though the position has been devalued so much. It's not like he's a guy that they just picked up off waivers or something like that. I think he's good enough for them to be a lot better than they are at running the football. And I don't really – you look at – again, I know Brian Johnson becomes a whipping boy for everybody, but I look at that game Sunday. Yeah, you guys saw it. For once in his life, Kenny Gainwell was extremely effective early in that game.
That was a great run.
So they stopped using it.
Yeah. That was a great block by Kelsey.
Rashad Penny was on the field for 2 snaps. They were back-to-back plays where they ran him into the middle of the line, and he looked okay.
Well, I would argue, guys,
rest of the game.
to Jody's point, what happened in the Minnesota game was an outlier. What happened in Tampa Bay? Oh, he can run for 130 yards any week when Jalen Hurts is healthy, and people are scared of Jalen Hurts and manipulating the spacing. Also, Vita Vea didn't play a lot in that game. That probably impacted it as well. But when Jalen Hurts is healthy, you can go for 130 against anybody.
But
when
what?
He's not,
the Eagles line up in 11 personnel almost every snap.
Yeah.
Which historically has not been the case here. And you want to put, if you had 2 tight ends like you did before Dallas Goedert got hurt, that you really like, maybe put Jack Stoll in the backfield next to DeAndre Swift or something like that. Do something to help your running game. Get in a running formation. And, I think you would see some results against stacked boxes. I'm no X and O guy, but that seems to be how it works for a lot of teams. Running out of 11 personnel is not you got wide receivers over here that aren't, involved in the equation most of the time.
Yeah, they like to spread the field. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. I don't think anybody uses more empty sets than the Philadelphia Eagles. And, I think in a lot of ways that's just the modern game. But and you got to get good at the RPOs, which they're typically very good at. But when the quarterback is completely healthy, and when he's not, I don't think they're a very good running team. I say it this way, Les. I don't think they're a good traditional running team where you just hand the quarterback's under center. You just turn around and hand the ball off to insert name.
Oh, he's not under center unless he's being pushed forward.
Yeah, exactly. He's not even under center.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're a traditional good running team. But they're
I don't see why they couldn't be, but you mentioned Hurts. Yeah, of course Hurts is an element, but I just don't see with Jason Kelsey and Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata and probably Cam Jurgens after the break and Lane Johnson up front. I don't see why you can't be an effective. I don't, not 8 yards a carry, but I don't see why you can't run out the clock, like they should have been able to do Sunday.
I think they lost the point of attack this past week more than they usually do. They're talking about percentage.
Well, the Dallas front is very good as well. You have to give them credit.
There were a lot of 1-yard runs in that game. Like, holy crap. You see the see the ball handed off, you think, okay, maybe 3 or 4 yards, and boom,
Yeah. Well, Micah Parsons is a pain in the ass to deal
Yeah.
with. I mean, I think Eagles fans got a little haughty because they had some success against him at times in his career and assumed that was going to continue in perpetuity. He's tough to deal with.
Yeah,
as they kind of found out.
But they could have run out the clock in that game. I've been accused on Twitter of making too much of this, but the 3rd and 3 play, which Nick
the throw to AJ,
a high percentage play, 30-yard fade down the left sideline. I'm sorry.
Right, let me ask you about
AJ
that.
Brown AJ Brown.
That brings up an excellent point. Do you think that's on Brian Johnson, or do you think that's on Jalen Hurts? Do you really think that the 30-yard fade to AJ was the number one read on that play?
Absolutely.
Or do you think the quarterback decided to throw it there?
It was not like he stood back there and looked around, right, John? I mean, that was the play.
No, that was the play because he got single coverage on AJ. And anytime you have single coverage on AJ, that's probably a good decision. I think that's what Nick is saying. And he's having a great year. He's obviously having a great year.
He's having a great year, but it's 3rd and 3, and you're a team that, let's say you get one of those 1-yard runs. Then you got 4th and 2. Can't you bang out 4th and 2 with a brotherly shove or something? Or, don't most teams have a 3-yard pitch and catch?
I think they're very comfortable with 4th and 1 with brotherly shove, but I don't know, 4th and 2.
Well, let's go back to 3rd and 3. Don't most teams have a quick pick play catch they can do for 3?
Yeah, bubble screen, but I wouldn't go bubble screen. I'd rather throw it to AJ down the field than go bubble screen. Now, some teams can run the bubble screen. That's one of the few things where I'm not comfortable. I don't think the Eagles do that well. They haven't done it well.
I would have found something. As great as AJ Brown is, I don't think a bomb down the left side of the field on the sideline is a
I go back to the same thing. They are dominant on 3rd and shorts when Jalen is healthy. Dominant. They can do anything. They defenses don't know what to do. But when you take away the running part of the equation, it becomes much easier for them. Not easy, but much easier.
Right. My original point was these games that they need to. That's the one thing I see right now is there's no excuse for them, being helpless at the end of that game and depending on Dallas to screw up to win the game, which is kind of what they ended up doing. They could have won that game going away. It's wonderful that they're 8-1, but Dallas comes out of that game with the huge statistical edge and all this, just for an inch here or there, we were the better team. They weren't the better team. In the 4th quarter, the Eagles played rope-a-dope. And, that.
Yeah, but now, all right, I'll ask you that, Les, because I and Seth and I go back and forth, I think, every week about the run game and the traditional running game. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, they were dominant in the 3rd quarter. They had two drives, 2 touchdowns. They basically held the football the entire 3rd quarter, and they had the 2-score lead. And then generally that's where they have the great 4-minute offense, which turns into an 8-minute offense, and they run out the clock. But that's why I keep harping on Jalen Hurts not being healthy in the run game. That last drive before AJ, I'm trying to pull it up as I have it. They ran the football traditional to DeAndre Swift. They get 2 yards on 1st down. Then they get they run them off
right.
They run them off right end and they get 1 yard. So now you're sitting there in a situation. This is the final one, and then they go up the middle where AJ runs into him. The final mess. And they lose 2 yards, and he fumbles, and they're lucky to get out with the ball.
Yeah.
Well, that's that's another huge area of conversation there. How does that happen in the 9th game of the season?
And that's not DeAndre's fault. He got run into, but
no,
the running game, they tried to run it traditionally, It wasn't working. So I guess you can blame the offensive line. But
there weren't the usual holes, John, plain and simple. They didn't have a great game. Now, you want to give credit to the Dallas defensive line. I agree with you. That's a pretty good front you're facing. It isn't. You got to consider the opposition. But this past week, I do not think their offensive line, which is just stellar almost week in and week out, and one of the best groupings in all of the National Football League, you can have a lesser game, and they had a lesser game against the Cowboys.
They sure did. In fact, they didn't really protect very well, I didn't think. Mailata gave up a real quick sack on one play. Guy just went right around.
Yeah, Sam Williams, really athletic, but people are going to figure out he's pretty good soon too.
Yeah,
I know Tyler Steen did not play well in pass protection. PFF gave him a disastrous pass blocking grade. Kelsey, they gave his best grade of the year. And
sometimes I don't get that, like Mailata has incredible PFF numbers this year. I haven't seen Sunday.
He had a bad game. He had a bad game from their perspective.
But he hasn't. Has he been as good as they think he's been this season?
I think he's.
Yeah.
I think he's been real good.
Sunday, I'd say, yeah.
Yeah. But I thought Jason was phenomenal on his birthday. I thought Lane was good, and I think Landon was good. Then I think the other two guys had some issues. I think it was Jordan's worst game of the year.
Yeah.
And I think it was, Tyler Steen's first start. So maybe that's.
Yeah, that was a tough front to start him against because they do a lot of stunting and things like that.
Sometimes I don't understand their handling of rookies.
Yeah.
Throwing Sidney Brown and Eli Ricks against CD Lamb, throwing Tyler Steen against that front, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
I had argued Sidney Brown. Start Sidney Brown. He just came back. Put him out there against the Jets. Get him some confidence. The Jets are not going to be able to throw the ball effectively, at least consistently. And they're like, nope, we're going to give him one more week. And then they throw him to the Wolves, not the Wolves. But I didn't understand that. And
some of the personnel stuff reminds me of long ago when Sean McDermott was the Eagles defensive coordinator. My biggest, I think a lot of people's biggest problem with Sean was he would be real high on a guy, and then the guy would play a couple games and not look so good, and suddenly the guy was like not just not starting, but you could never find him again. And I see that with this team.
Mario
Goodrich
example would be Mario Goodrich.
He
just disappeared like that.
He's not even good enough to be on the team. And you see that Sua definitely started struggling after a few weeks, and he got a little hip injury. So last week, Sua is out there for extra points, and that's it. You're not going to see Sua any other way.
I kind of, that's a good point because Mario, they threw Mario to the Wolves against Jefferson and Cooper Kupp.
Right.
That's pretty difficult. I'd like to see him against a more normal slot receiver. And all of a sudden you're out there with Eli Ricks, and he's trying, and Sidney Brown against CD Lamb. And guess what? They played like Mario Goodrich.
And when they put Slay on Lamb, suddenly it was okay. Why not just do that for the whole game? But I'm not a strategist. I don't know. But the Eli Ricks thing, to me, illustrated that they know they have a speed problem in the secondary. And they're kind of desperate to get some speed out there because he's not ready. He's an undrafted rookie who's in no way, shape, or form ready. He had like 60-some snaps on the season before Sunday. They're force feeding him, trying to get somebody out there who has more speed, and it was not a good. It didn't work out well. He took penalties. He got fooled. Not his fault, but
how about this? Sidney Brown was targeted 4 times, 4 completions, 50 yards. Eli Ricks was targeted 4 times, 4 completions, 72 yards. 8 for 8 when those 2 guys were targeted. Yeah. That was my one criticism of Dallas. It was like, well, CD got 16 targets. No, he should have got 25 targets until they figured
every play. Yeah, just throw CD Lamb. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess he would have probably collapsed at some point, but
maybe.
Got to take a snap off every once in a while. All right, Les, we kind of touched on earlier. Want to double back to Dallas Goedert and replacing him. If it's not going to be with a tight end, Jack Stoll just can't do what Dallas Goedert can do for a whole bunch of plays that the Eagles run. Some he can, but there's a whole bunch of things that you just ask him to do what Dallas does. Not going to work. He's just not the player that Dallas is. So the Eagles could come with different groupings. Sirianni specifically said that yesterday, meaning more wide receivers on the field. Is the return of Quez key? No. That Quez is getting close to coming back. That the threat that is, the speed that is, Quez Watkins going to open up and space that Eagle offense without Dallas Goedert. Is that the key to getting by without Dallas? Quez's returning speed.
I don't think he plays a role in here at all. I would be much rather see, like, Julio Jones is more of a comp to Dallas Goedert than Quez is. Last year, when you said that, it reminded me last year when they were doing without Dallas, suddenly Devontae Smith got a lot more targets and really had a strong stretch of games. I think you might see more of Devontae being featured, than he is some weeks as we have it now. But I don't really – it is a tough thing to do without Dallas Goedert. I'm not sure. The trade deadline's long past. I don't know if there's any – that people were kidding about Gronk Sunday when the injury happened. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know what you do at this point. There might be somebody sitting on a practice squad somewhere that I don't know about who's some undiscovered gem. But, I think from what Nick said yesterday,
the Giants picked up last year. I forget his name. When the Giants were playing well, they picked up, Isaiah Hodgkins.
They did.
Practice squad. They need a nice little stretch. But I think that would be more Julio Jones than anything else at this stage. And we'll see how much Julio has left. You mentioned
didn't target him at all Sunday, which I was a little bit surprised after the touchdown the week before,
But now I think it'll be more relevant without Dallas in there. You got to get somebody else involved in theory in the passing game. In theory, that's going to be Julio Jones. We'll see if it shakes that way. You mentioned Slay a little bit. I asked Nick this because I was talking to Slay after the game, and I don't think Nick understood what I was trying to say. But Slay after the game said flat out on that last drive, all right, he was going to take Lamb. And he did, and the Eagles managed to hold off the Cowboys. Self-inflicted wounds partially from Dallas, but they had a 1st and 5 from the 6-yard line.
Yes.
And they went back to the 11, to the 22, and then the 27. So, Eagles deserve some credit, but 2 penalties in there, big sack that Dak Prescott took. A little lack of awareness there. But I asked Nick, how does that work when a star player says, all right, I'm taking this guy, because it affects everybody else. You can't just run on the field and say, I'm taking Lamb. That means Ricks has got to move, and Bradbury's got to understand what's going on. And I said, how does that work? And he went into, well, you can't do that. Well, he did do it.
Yeah, he did do
it. He did do it. Where are we with Sean Desai? Are this passing, nobody's paying that much attention to it because they win games, but they're down at the bottom of the league when it comes to passing defense. Now, part of that is teams are in desperation mode. They're always trying to come back against the Eagles, but I think just to the naked eye, you can see they haven't been good in pass coverage.
Right. That is true.
Sean Desai.
Some of the things that help him, Sean Desai, are they haven't given up a ton of points. A lot of times because their defense isn't on the field that much, they the other thing is that somebody pointed out, because they're so good against the run, teams throw so much more against them than they do against other teams. So you have so many more attempts, you're going to have more completions and more yards. To an extent, that's true. But I kind of give him a pass because they've had all these ridiculous injuries in the secondary. And, they just haven't been able to put a group out there that's cohesive and experienced. But
does Bradley Roby calm that down?
I sure hope he can. I think that's a big thing coming off the break. That's one of the biggest questions coming off the break is, can Bradley Roby really make a difference? And the other thing, I think I'm not ready to say that Byard is washed up. They kind of threw him in there. He hadn't played in their defense. He's played 2 weeks in a row and not looked good. But maybe with a bye week, he kind of gets his feet under him a little bit and has a better understanding of how everybody works together. And they've just made a lot of changes back there. And I don't think they fit together well. I think guys are expecting guys to do other stuff than what they're doing on some plays. And I'm not good at explaining the technical aspects of it, but I think they don't, when they're playing a zone coverage, I don't think the parts just flow.
Communication.
Yeah.
Communication issues. Yeah.
All right. Last one for me. And I need to put forth this in a special way. Otherwise I'm going to get crushed here because it's not a hypothetical. It's an actual question, but it's stated off facts again. All my hypotheticals come off facts. The last time the Philadelphia Eagles rallied from a double-digit deficit in the second half was last year against Indianapolis, which was mid-season. So the entire second half of the season, it never happened. Surely in the playoffs, it didn't happen. They weren't behind. They grabbed the lead against the 49ers Giants, and they were ahead against Kansas City, but they couldn't hold on at the end. It's an unknown at this point. Now, if the druthers are doing it the way the Eagles are doing it, get the lead, don't give up the lead, extend the lead, win. Yeah, we'd prefer that. But it'd be nice to know if the Eagles are capable of coming back from a double-digit deficit in the second half of a game. Hasn't happened in a full calendar year of games. I'm not saying they should go out and try and fall behind by 10 points and get into the third quarter of the next game. But do you have any concern with the fact that it just hasn't been the case and we haven't been able to judge whether they're going to be able to do something like that?
Jody, I had not thought about that, frankly. I don't know. I mean, they had an early double-digit deficit against Washington,
right?
That I kind of think they're a team that shouldn't be in a double-digit deficit against anybody in the second half. But we are going to see some tough teams coming up here, and it might come into play. I don't know. I mean, they can certainly move the ball. Whether their defense can stop the bleeding in a situation like that is an excellent question. Offensively, I think they're capable of coming back and scoring points in a quick, expeditious manner. But I'd rather not find out. I was trying to.
Don't want to test drive that theory. Huh?
When you were saying that,
everybody wants to play from the lead in this league. Play from the damn.
Well, if you're if you're in a double-digit hole in the second half, you're probably going to lose. I mean, that's the way it goes for almost every team. But when have the Eagles been in that situation? Yeah. Even last year, I don't know. I
will say Jalen Hurts' numbers are outrageous when they're trailing. They generally come back and score right away to get them. To get them.
You guys, Les, you might saw it, John. You might not have seen it because you were there. They put a graphic up on the game the other day. Jalen Hurts quarterback rating when trailing.
Yeah.
Number 1 in the National Football League. Yeah. Dak Prescott's quarterback rating when trailing. Number 32 in the National Football League.
I do not know that part, but I know Jalen has been. Every time I'm thinking in that Washington game, Les, I said, all right, it was 14-3. And I said, maybe this isn't the Eagles' day. And Jalen goes right out there and scores and leads the team down. And I'm like, all right, Washington's not going to be able to hold up against this. And they play better than I expected, the Commanders. But he's been unbelievable when the few times they are trailing. So he deserves credit for that. Les Bowen deserves credit for being Les Bowen, at Les Bowen on Twitter.
Yes.
Bowen on the Birds, the pod on Fridays. You have anybody booked this week? Anybody big coming up that we can?
I haven't reached out to anyone yet. I'm trying to figure out what a good bye week. Usually, I try to get I've been trying to get two guests. One is somebody who covers the Eagles, and then somebody who covers the other team. Obviously, there is no other team this week.
Yes.
So I'm trying to figure out. I'm thinking
Get your flexibility in booking, Les. Take advantage of that.
Yeah, I do have. That's right. Well, I'm kind of paralyzed with indecision here. It's not like, not that everybody I asked always can do it, but I'm kind of thinking, what should I do here? Should I try for something that I wouldn't normally
try to get somebody who can explain Andy's success on bye weeks, because that is very, very good. And they're facing that because the Chiefs have a bye this week as well.
Right.
Coming
he
back.
Studies. Andy really studies, the other team during that bye week and figures out things that really work against that team in the bye week. And I don't get with Nick. I don't get that sense quite as much. Maybe that's unfair, but I don't know what. The Eagles just need this bye week to heal more than they need to study.
Yeah, and they're taking off the whole stinking week, so they need to heal. They're banged up.
They and every other team in the National Football League, because that's what they collectively bargained. Can't stand it, but it is the fact, Jack. Les, always a pleasure. Appreciate you jumping in with us. We'll get you back up in a couple of weeks. You got to tune in to Bowen on the Birds and find out who Les comes up with for his other guest. Yes, that's the whodunit of the week. Who will be Les's second guest this week? Les, thanks, bud.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Les.
Bowen on the Birds here with us on Birds 365. All right, Jody Mac, we got to come back. Ricky Ricardo should join us.
I can't roll my R's, Jody. I can't do it. I can't do it. I took 4 years of Spanish. I can't do it.
I took 6 years of Spanish, 2 in college, after 4 years in high school.
By the way, it's not impressive what I retained. I will say.
Miss Toro, my sophomore year Spanish teacher, would be impressed. She was the one who taught me how to roll my R's. Ricky Ricardo's going to join us in about 10 or 15 minutes. Oh, I got a tight end question for McMullen when we come back. Do the Eagles actually have the answer on their roster right now? A guy that nobody's seen yet. I've seen, because he's an ex-Jet. But is the answer to the Eagles tight end question already on the roster? I'll run that by Johnny Mac when we come back here on Birds 365.